of a great speaker, or the DNA of a successful speaker, or the DNA of a speaker? So my first question to the group is, how many of you are public speakers?
I am.
Okay, so let me see if your thoughts, either in the chat or just let me know, because I'm not going to mute everybody. Julian's, thanks, Julian. So that's a yes from you. Well, I have some news for you. For all those who said no, guess what? The purpose of speaking is to do it in public. You actually don't need to speak to talk to yourself. Some people do, of course, speak when they're talking to themselves, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the purpose of speaking is to do it in public, to share information with others. So we're all really public speakers. Anyone who's has a small child and knows a small child, we start public speaking quite early when we want something or we want some attention. Now, when I say public speaking, I'm talking about rhetoric. And the definition of rhetoric is the ancient art of speaking effectively as a means of communication and persuasion. So the time now, according to my PC, is 1945. And we're going to go to about 8:15, if that's suitable for people. And just before that, we'll have some chance for some questions and answers. If you have any questions, if I say anything you want to comment on, please do that using the chat window. Or if it's something urgent, I'm happy for you to pipe in. But generally, use the chat window. Is that okay with everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Okay, well, you might want to know a little bit about me. And of course, Julian will recognize these slides. So I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully it will share. Oh, I've got to set screen 1 and share this. So again, this doesn't seem to be, bear with me a second. I'll try again. Share. Oh, wait. It is sharing. Can you, Julian, can you see my screen?
Not yet.
No? Okay, let me try again. It says at the bottom, you are screen sharing.
Yeah, we're seeing the rhetoric screen.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. So we'll get on moving.
I can't see their screen.
You can or you can't?
I can't.
You can't?
No, yes, I can't.
Oh.
There is something in there, communication, persuasion.
That's the one. Do you have to move it around your PC somewhere, or? So it is being shared. But what it says is, and I'll repeat again, it's the ancient art of speaking and communicating and persuading. Any luck? Any more luck there?
That's what is showing on my page right now.
Yeah, that's good. That's what I want to see. Lovely.
Okay.
Lovely. You're in the place to be. Right. So as I was saying, you may want to know a little bit about me to help you put the session in context. My name is Michael Don Smith, and I've been teaching and presenting for a long time. In 1979, I was in the Royal Air Force, where I taught communications and aerospace studies. 20 years later, some of the things happened, but in terms of, I was delivering speaking, and I was a keynote speaker in Ghana, Africa, Nigeria, the United States, Hong Kong, UK, all over. So I've done a little bit of speaking around the world. My topic was mainly on project management, Julian. I did a lot of speaking on that, and also on business development. In the latter years, I did a lot of work with third sector, including sickle cell organizations. And that's when I worked in Wolverhampton with your brother, Dennis. We did quite some bit of work together. 20 years after that, after suffering a stroke, was able to maintain my speaking career because although my walking and using my right hand took a long time to come back, my speaking, after a bit of a tragedy when I couldn't speak at all, I was able to do so. So I've been doing it a long time. I've been through some wars, and I believe that as we move into this technological age where artificial intelligence is taking a lot of the jobs and tasks, and where organizations like your own are perhaps not being engaged and doing the good work they could do as much, because young people, the modern people, seem to think that these computer technology is going to replace everything that humans do. But I believe if you have a message, if you have a calling, then really you have to use the number one skill that you have, something that's built into your DNA. And as I mentioned before, from as a child, the thing that separates human beings in the majority is our big brain, which some people believe has been adapted for the communication we do, for language. Because we're, as far as I'm aware, apart from dolphins, we're the only animal that can create symbols. You know something about that? Can create symbols, signs, and metaphors and models so they can pass their knowledge down through the generations. Now, before I continue, does that kind of make sense? Are you following me with this idea and this concept?
Yeah, that makes sense, definitely.
Yeah, so thank you.
With you so far.
Yeah, so what we've learned and what we continue to learn is that this skill is still uniquely ours. Yes, there are computers that can mimic this very well, but the actual creative energy, the urge, the impetus when we communicate appears to still be a fairly human paradigm. However, it's amazing that this public speaking, this communication skill is not studied as much as it used to be. You see, there is a thought from the ancient world that if you're going to have a civilization, if you're going to have a group of people that work together cooperatively and creatively, they have to be able to express their thoughts and their ideas eloquently and persuasively. And if your ability to do this is not of the highest order, then your message will not be communicated as effectively as it could be. Not only that, when you do communicate, you can't be sure that it's been effective as it should be. Again, I'll check in with me. Would you follow? Would you vote for that thought? Chris, was that, I'm not sure.
Definitely.
No, I would agree. I'd agree.
Yeah. Okay. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to do a little talk and give you about 2,000 years of rhetoric in about 10, 15 minutes. And I'm up for that challenge if you're up for listening to me. So what I want you to go away from this session with is a common understanding of what a speech or a presentation entails. And perhaps if we continue our conversation, we can dig deeper into the belly of the beast. So there are 5 parts I want to say. The first thing that's really important if you're going to become a more competent and effective speaker, and that doesn't mean to say you're not a great speaker already. I just think that better is infinite. We can all learn. I've been doing this a long time and I'm still learning. So the first thing is, before you even begin to speak, you must make sure you have a point. That's the number one thing. Stephen Covey said, start with the end in mind. Doesn't mean start at the end, a difficult thing to do, but really you should know what the purpose or the point of your speech is. So if we're going to have great rhetoric, we have a point. There were two ancient speakers, Demosthenes and Cicero. Two lawyers, two great speakers, two great spokesmen, but they had a major difference in their styles. Cicero was the guy who could win any argument, and you will have those people in your lodge, in your community, and you know this guy knows his stuff, and he's going to be able to come up with some really stunning ideas and thoughts, and it'll be a challenge to question that person. This was Cicero. The other person, the great speaker of the time, was Demosthenes, and he was less eloquent, just as intelligent, just as knowledgeable, but most of the things that he taught were from the heart as opposed to the head. And what was said about them was, if you wanted to win an argument, a battle of wits, you would recruit Cicero. But if you want to win a battle of the heart, if you wanted somebody to talk to your troops before they went to war, or you wanted somebody to commit and perhaps lay down their life for a cause, as opposed to entertainment or education, then you would be much better served to have Cicero as your agent. And this is one of the great challenges in rhetoric. You need to have a point, know what it is, and understand your strategy for getting that point across, which brings us to the second part of my thesis. A conversation, a rhetorical conversation, is a journey from where you are, from where your audience is right now and where you would like them to be. So I've got the point, I know what I'm trying to get across, but then I have to develop a strategy that will take my audience from where they are now to acceptance of that point. That's the journey. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yes.
So now we know what we're trying to do, and we've come up with an idea of how we're going to get there. Well, what are the routes to there? Well, the first thing we have to understand is that there are three key styles, not styles, so three key ways you're going to deliver your message. And they are, and you may want to jot this down. L is for levity. G is for gravity or gravitas. And B is for brevity. So you may want to have a conversation. Your point may just be to entertain your audience, do something light. Doesn't always have to be world shattering, just to inform them of some information. And you can make it light and pleasant. And that's a very persuasive model. You know, you want people in the group who are fun, and not everything has to be war and peace. You can just discuss what's been happening recently. And sometimes that's very useful. But on the other hand, there may be things that are grave, serious, heavy. And we have to know that that's the style we're going to use. And then there's also how much time do we have? Right now, we've got this Zoom call, and we've got a short period of time in which we're trying to do something. So in that case, we have to have the skill to deliver our message briefly, concisely, nicely packaged. So there are three things you need. Again, you need to know what I'm trying to do, how I'm going to get there, the style I'm going to use, but also, is it light, fun? Is it important, really serious, lawyers involved, health involved, or is it, and how long have I got to do it? May I move on?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then the next piece of my whirlwind tour of rhetoric are these. Now, these are the ways you can argue. We have things like the argue ad hominem, argue ad belliculum, and these are the classic ways you argue. Now, there are 12 of those, but I've chosen the 4 key ones that are used. Now, the L stands for logos, which is logic. And very often we argue to logic, to the numbers, to the science. But as you all know, science doesn't always win. You can give people the facts and the figures, and they'll say, you know what, still ain't going to do it. Or they might say, wow, I see what you're saying there. It makes sense. The numbers add up. Let's go with that. So that's a good one to have in your toolkit, the logic, the reasoning argument. There's also the E stands for ethos, which is the ethics, your authority based on your experience. And you may say, yes, the numbers say that, the logic says that, but my morals, my moral compass, my inner man, my inner woman, my guidance tells me that the ethos that we stand for, the things that we believe in, say that this is how we should go. So that's another route for the persuasive argument, the rhetoric. P stands for pathos, and that's the root of words like empathy, sympathy. So it's the feelings, you know, I feel that emotionally the correct way to go is this. We want to save lives, bring the children up the right way. And so you might argue to the emotions of your audience. So logos is logic, and you see that's the opposite corner. And then you have ethos, which is the principles, the beliefs, the credos, the culture. And you have pathos, the emotions, the feeling, perhaps even the spiritual essence of what you're trying to achieve. And that's the way to argue. And the fourth one is kairos, K-A-I-R-O-S. And kairos is time. Often there's a need to do something because of urgency. So we'll say we have to do this because time is running out, time is short. Or perhaps we might say, listen, we've got a lot of time to do this. Let's sit down, let's work it out, let's gather the information. So you've got four key, I mean, there are 12 ancient ones, but the four key ones are logos, ethos, pathos, and kairos. Logic, moral or ethical arguments, emotional, pathos arguments to the emotion, and kairos, the ever-present master called time, which never changes and never forgives. Am I okay to move on?
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Lovely. The next one, and this is very important now, you know what the point is, you know the journey you want to take your audience on, you know which category of discussion it is, you've got some ways to argue it, so now you're ready to build your speech. The I at the top of that diagram stands for innovation or invention. So you're basically going to make up what you're going to talk about. And this is a good time not to be too strict. Brainstorming is a word they use, or you get, if it's a group of you, let's all put our ideas together. So we won't have any rules, we'll get all the ideas, or maybe it's an existing idea that you want to innovate on, or it's an old story, you want to give a new twist. So you spend the first part, let me get the content, let me get the stuff together that I'm going to share with my audience. And don't limit yourself, no rules, just throw it all in the pot. And when you give yourself a certain amount of time, when you've got that stuff together on paper, on a computer, whatever, you've got it all there. Once it's down and it's recorded, you've got it all there, you then move to the A. And the A stands for arrangement. So now you've got it, you start to arrange it. Okay, that looks like that subject goes together there. This is affiliated with that. These are the pieces that we can put here. And you start to put the jigsaw puzzle together and you get a shape. And if there are certain rules, and I spent some time with Julian today, and we looked at rules for actually doing this in detail, you follow a pattern or a principle. So whatever your model is, you arrange your speech according to the model that you're going to be using. So invention or innovation gets your content. You then arrange the content to follow the model you're going to use. And the E stands for elocution. And that is your actual physical ability to deliver it. And this is where you will not practice the material necessarily, but you think, wow, I'm going to be using Zoom. I may be using it in a forum which is a one-to-many in a hall. It may be a small group of people, but you need to be able to effectively produce the information in such a way that it's acceptable to the audience. And that's what all elocution is. Elocution lessons mean that you can articulate your message appropriately. And it could be, if you're from the West Indies, you might have to put the emphasis on the right side label, because we have a chat in a way so you can really understand when we have to try reason with you. But on the other hand, that to say that English is evolved and pathwise derived, but it doesn't matter what your style is. You may need to be using the Queen's English or Canadian accent, whatever. So elocution is more than just Peter picked a pepper peppers, where's the pecker pick a pepper? It's all you've got to do to make the message acceptable to your audience. Does that land? Is that acceptable to you?
Yes.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Sounds
So that's
good, yeah.
elocution. So invention, innovation, and then we arrange it. Then we use the right elocution for our audience and for our venue. Now we've done that, we then have to use memory. We memorize it. You don't have to memorize an entire speech. I would suggest you don't memorize the entire speech, because this can make it stilted and make it seem artificial. You do, however, in my recommendation, need to memorize and know parts of it. Usually the close or the ending, so that when you come to the ending, you know what you're going to say, often called the call to action. So that's when you're actually going to say to people, now I've told you everything I'm going to tell you. There's an old military one. Tell them what you're going to tell them what you're telling them, and tell them what you told them. That's so the close where you tell them what you told them. So thank you for listening to me. Now I'd like to make sure that you understand these key facts. You summarize, and what I'd like you to do now is this, and you ask. That needs to be concrete and memorized. The other thing you want to memorize perhaps is your introduction. My name's Michael Don Smith. I'm a passionate, inspirational, world-class communicator. I love what I do. I really love what I do. And I thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak with you this evening. And I want to talk about the subject of the DNA of great speakers and 2,000 years of powerful rhetoric. That's something I've said before, and I know how to say it. But then I've gone into the body of my talk, and then I've adapted it to suit you. So memory is incredibly important. There's another magical thing about memory. The more you use it, the better it gets. The more you memorize, the more you can memorize. You won't wear out your memory, I promise you. Whatever age you are, the only thing that dulls a memory is not memorizing new stuff. And there's a whole science, ancient science of memory, with the memory rooms, memory syntax, ways to learn things. And the more you use it, the better it gets. So invention, create your stuff, arrangement, get it in the right model that suits what you're going to do. Practice your elocution so you can deliver it correctly for the audience. Memorize the bits you need to memorize so you can make sure the important bits are delivered correctly. You don't normally memorize a speech. If it's something that's a legal requirement or an ancient thing, or even in the church, it might be a memory verse. It may be, and I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having an everlasting gospel to preach unto all those who cover the earth, saying with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment hath come. Well, I can't make that up. I have to know my scripture, because I'm delivering that verbatim. And it's so much more powerful if you can deliver it from memory than having to read it. Would you agree?
Yes.
Agreed.
Yes.
So memory is very important. As I say to you, the more you use it, the better it gets. You will not wear it out. So whether it be memory verses in church, whether it be poems, poetry, that's another great way to improve your memory, and a good way to begin a speech if you've got a great quotation. And then the last one is the D, which stands for delivery. And you just get up and you go ahead and do it. Now, I've gone through quite a bit there, so I'll just summarize it before I ask you for questions. And I'm happy to take questions on this or anything around speaking. But I would say my last main point is that over time, if you practice these principles and you understand them, they'll become yours. You cannot imitate another speaker. without a great deal of effort, and you certainly can't do it consistently. So this then, if you learn this, the way you implement it will be your personal style. And it will be the DNA of every speech you ever have to give, because these things I'm showing you are timeless. And things that have been around for a long time and passed from generation to generation usually do that because they work. We don't pass things down through time if they're not effective. So, have a point before you get up to speak. Know the journey that you're planning to take your audience on. Be aware it is a journey, it's a conversation, and you as a speaker, as the leader, are going to guide your people with vision. Know which of the three strategies, and they can overlap, don't get me wrong, they don't have to be one or none. You may say, I'm going to begin with levity, I'm going to be quite brief or quite long, and then I'm going to finish with a really important point. So you can mix them, but know how you're going to do it. Then which argument, or again, combination of arguments you're going to use to get your message across to your audience. Is it going to be logic, emotion, because of time? I've missed one out there. What's the one I've missed out? I'm just going to turn my screen off.
From what point, sorry?
I said 3 of the 4. Logic, emotion,
Ethics.
ethics. Thank you. Just a little mini test there for you. And I see that I've somehow stopped my screen here. And then we've got
Kairos.
Kairos is time, which is, and then, so that was that one. That's a journey, the logical argument. Then we've got how we construct it, which is invention, arrangement, elocution, memory,
Memory.
Great.
Delivery.
and delivery. Thank you so much. So really, that's incredibly quick. I hope you've caught some of that. We've got 5 minutes where I'm very happy to answer any questions and get some feedback, your thoughts on that. Was it useful? Would you like to do perhaps some more of that? Because that is my call to action. I'm happy. I believe that rhetoric could be one of the keys to developing your group and getting everybody to a stage where you can spread the message effectively and powerfully. And just by doing that, you will enhance your own ability across all your spheres of influence. Any thoughts, any questions for me before I hand over to
Yes, I have a
Beverly?
question.
Yes,
I
Beverly.
have yes. I speak a lot in my order. I wouldn't say I'm a speaker, but I like to speak. And I'm a people's person in everything. So I just want to know, what is the time limit that, to give a real good speech that you don't bore someone? Because time and time again, when we have guest speaker, you tend to speak so long that the audience get a little bored. So I think that there should be, for speakers, guest speaker, you should be a certain time limit. And I would like to know from your, from your experience, what would be the perfect time limit for a guest speaker?
Okay, the answer is 42.5 minutes.
I wasn't
Okay.
even thinking that long.
So let me, that was a little facetious. The longest people should speak for in one, okay, let me put it this way. You have different types of speeches. You have the 5-minute briefing. You have perhaps you even have a 60-second signature speech. So in 60 seconds, you can deliver all those things I've just shown you, all of them. So you can have a 60-second, what's called elevator pitch. You may have heard that term, or an elevator speech. You can have a 5-minute briefing. You can have a 15-minute information session, 30. What I've just given you there is a 30-minute education slot, which some people like BNI and organizations, they say, oh, I'm going to have a mission speaker, and we craft what I've just shown you. So you can get some of the, And then if you've got a keynote speaker who's perhaps traveled all the way from Canada to the UK, that person's traveled that far and they're a great speaker. You don't want them, you want to get them to, you know, get some value from that person. Or if they're, you know, an accomplished professional like Julian, you want to get their information. But I was saying, the brain can only endure as much as the butt can stand. Okay, I don't know if I've gone too far there. So 45 minutes is about how long before you need a bathroom break or stretch your legs or get out. So you really don't want people stuck listening to the one thing just for, so 45 minutes, that's why 42 is a bit of a joke. So the most you want a speaker for is 45 minutes. And the length of the talk is dictated by the amount of interest and value that the audience is going to get.
I would
Now,
agree.
an accomplished speaker can get as much value out of 5 or 10 minutes as a less accomplished speaker could do in the 45 minutes. So the answer isn't the same for everybody. I know it's a bit long, but it's a great question, Beverly. So your
Okay,
speaking slot should be
thank you so much.
Was that helpful?
Very much so. Thank
Hi,
you.
hi, my name is Khadisha Tate. I'm a project consultant working across the UK with universities, helping them to implement software for their students and staff. So that's what I do. I do enjoy the topic. You touched on a lot of points and you covered it in your second half where you talked about combining styles and combining how you're going to argue. That then goes on to something that I was reading a week ago on Aristotle, who talks about there's a conversation around whether emotions should be part of ethical decisions. And Aristotle believes that it's a combination. You've got to get a balance because you can't make an ethical decision without considering feelings and emotions. So this is a very interesting topic, absolutely like it. And to answer or to add to your answer to the question that Beverly just asked, again, the length of the speech depends on the topic. So now I would like this to carry on because I'm interested and engaged. It's a topic that I really like. And also every day you learn. So one of the things that I've experienced whilst I've worked from home before in my everyday job, working from home permanently over the last 6 months and using Zoom, you have to also adapt everything you've just learned plus delivering it to an audience over the screen. So you're constantly learning. And also to pick up on the brain, I was reading David Eagleman Incognito about the brain and how it's like the computer and parts of it that we don't even know what it's doing behind the scenes. So I'm very interested in what you're doing today and hope to hear from you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Khadisha. Can I, you just picked up 2 points I want to add for you there. The second one is the brain is nothing like a computer. That's number one, and we can talk about that later.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
And the other one, I'm just being a little bit, what's the word, controversial. I'm never accidentally controversial. It may be something I'll talk about in another talk there, but it is reasonably important to make that distinction. I won't go into why, but I'll just tease you with that one. What you said was Zoom. So if I can give you a little tip about Zoom calls, just throwing in there because you mentioned that. Now the difference, one of the key differences you could pay attention to when you're making a Zoom call, you have to understand that you have other issues than a live call. You see, in a live call, I can see you twitch and fidget and struggle. So I'm lost that feedback. So it's great that with the cameras, but Khadisha, I can't see you, for example, now. So that's something we've got to do. So at the beginning of this talk, I asked you to send me chat messages, use the reactions, which only Julian did, and Dulcine. Thank you so much. I've got a hand wave from Dulcine as well. So we have to try and get our audience to use some of these things so we can get a little feel for that. The other thing to understand is they're at home. So they're young children might walk in. So the opportunity of distraction are much greater than at the lodge. And you've got to think, okay, I'm ready any minute for a distraction to come in, and I've got to be aware of that. So it does put a bit more pressure on you because when you're giving the talk, like I'm trying to look at people and see, remember, I think I saw, it wasn't somebody earlier, I said, oh, it looks like you're a little bit confused answering the question. So you can actually see people's faces. So be aware of that. So let me move this. I'll tell you who it was. It was my new friend, Chris. Yeah, you've moved up on screen. So I can see Chris has nodded. Chris got a lovely smile. I like Chris already, not that I don't like the rest of you. But Chris is engaging with me across Zoom. Dulcine, lovely smile there. And Beverly's had a nice smile there. And Sandra's been so responsive. And I've seen Jasper, he's kind of a serious guy there, but he's nodded at the right places. So I'm quite confident that Jasper's enjoying it. And Dwight, so you can still use these interactive human responses, but you've got to be a little bit more sensitive to that. So you can use Zoom calls, but it is actually, perhaps a Zoom call, 30 minutes about it. On question and answer is fine, but the main bit, because to keep that level of sensitivity and awareness of what's going on is not easy. So I hope that helps a little bit. Kadisha, just thank you so much for your comments. I do agree with everything you said. And the work you're doing is similar to some work I'm doing with in technology supply chain, because we work with universities. So maybe something we can speak about elsewhere. I'm looking at the time now. We're 2019, so I'm happy to go to 8:30 if you're happy to keep here with me. So any other questions or thoughts I can support?
I have a question for you.
Hi there.
Yeah, one question.
Before your question, is it Dwight? How do I pronounce your first name?
You pronounce it Dwight?
Dwight. Okay, thank you.
Right. Right. Yeah. Do a lot of the famous public speakers have certain commonalities?
Yes.
And what are they?
So, famous is a word we could get into, and we need to understand why they're famous. There was a lady called Jade Goody, God rest her soul, who was famous because she was in a TV reality show. And she got a lot of airtime, and there are people who get their fame like that, and they get airtime, they get what was called by someone their 15 minutes of fame. So famous, I'm going to ask you if I put out, so give me a little more, give me some more ideas on what you mean by famous.
Famous as in they attract on a global scale. They've made they've drawn a lot of people worldwide through their oratory skills.
Excellent, excellent. Well, yes, they do have a commonality. There are three key things if you want to be attractive. One of them, the most counterintuitive one, is you've got to be divisive. You've got to be Marmite or Aki or hot pepper sauce or something, because, and we can take a really famous and successful orator of the day, Mr. Trump. Incredibly successful, incredibly attractive to his base. And he's successful because he doesn't mess about. He says, I don't like this, I do like that. And if you're of his mindset, I think in the Bible it says, would that you were hot or cold, but you are lukewarm. The first key, if you want that attractiveness, is don't be lukewarm. Yeah? So very important. Another thing that's incredibly attractive is know your stuff. People often say, listen, I don't like him, I don't love him, but boy, him know him as that boat, you know? Excuse me if that doesn't, if you don't understand that, but know your stuff. Because even if people don't agree with you, they'll respect the fact that you are a master
Of what you do. I agree.
What you do. I don't like him, but I can't argue with what he's saying, with what, you know. And the last one, I mean, there are 6, I'm going to give you really quick as well, but you may not get it. So there are what are called the 6 principles of Robert Cialdini's of influence. And they are reciprocity, be polite, be considerate, know your audience, interact with them honestly, reciprocity, the handshake. I should make Julian finish his off, but he only learned them quite recently. Consistency, be consistent. That's similar to know your stuff. Be consistent. If you're talking about jam today, if your expertise, your area is jam, don't pretend you can talk about cheese and bread and Be consistent in your expertise and your subject matter. Authority. Have the authority, again, of knowing your stuff. Be, you know, you've got to be the one. You know, I think there's Tony Robbins, there's so many of them, but they have an area which they're the authority on. So that's reciprocity, consistency. Then you have liking. Now that doesn't mean make people like you, because you've got to have that, but know who you are like. Now I've looked at the screens and I see that you appear to be someone like me. So I tested it by chatting a little bit apart and just seeing things. And I saw the smiles, I saw the connection. So I tested what I would have to do to let you know that you are like me. I am like you. Listen to this one keenly. Like me equals like me. Like me equals like me. So if I show that I'm like you, this is a tribal thing, this is a community thing, I show that I'm like you, then you are more likely at the snake brain level, unconsciously, you will start to like me. And there are various ways you can do that. So reciprocity, consisting, liking, authority. Then there's social proof. I did that here. I showed you at the beginning pictures of me in the Royal Air Force. I showed pictures of me on a podium. I showed pictures of me going through trials and tribulation. And so I was trying to impress upon you, not to impress you, but to impress upon you that I have some level of time in the saddle. So I demonstrated my authority. And then the social proof was obviously people were looking at me. I talked about Dennis Carlson, we worked together, and that so I gave you social proof that I knew about the lodge and for a long time on your 40th anniversary. And then the last one, and you may like this one, is scarcity. Don't be too available. Be really expensive, have really limited amount of your time. So if people want to get to you, they got to jump some hoops. Because, you know, if you got, you know, if it's hard to get that kiss, why it's sweet, you know. So there's quite a few bits and pieces there. Is that helpful? You're right.
Yeah, that's extremely helpful. Definitely.
Okay, I'm just looking at the time. We've got 5 minutes, maybe time for a couple of, and I'll try and make my answers shorter. Anything else from anyone?
Mine's not so much a question, but more an observation, and see if you agree. It sounds, for everything you've said so far, which I enjoyed, great, but it sounds as though everything you said can be applied to almost anything. Writing a book, starting a business, making a play, a film, everything you said applies to all of that. Would you agree?
I absolutely agree. A great insight, Chris, because all the things you've talked about are things that influence, impact on people through communication. In a business, so where wouldn't you or couldn't you use this in a relationship with a family, a father to son? And that's why I said to you at the beginning, or I titled this, the DNA of every speech you'll ever have to give. You get this right, and it will make speaking effortlessly, but you will have to put the effort in to make it effortless. Bit of a contradiction there. The harder you work, the easier it gets, and you've got to keep working hard. It's easy if I work hard. I don't know. You can explain that one to me sometime, but yeah, I agree with what you said, Chris. Great observation. Any more, or are we about ready to ask Mr. Tate to wrap this up? Julian, I think we're about there.
Just before you go, there's one question. I was quite surprised when you say Trump was a good speaker. To me, whenever he has something to say, it comes over more as a comedian rather than someone who could motivate and unite people. He's there more, appears to me to be more of a laughing stock. I was sort of expecting you to say someone like Churchill would be a prime example of a motivational speaker, or someone who can grab an audience and get the message across. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And did someone have I heard a little murmur there. Someone have a thoughts on that themselves?
Oh, I thought you said Trump was more divisive than a great speaker? Because you.
No, I said both. I said he was
Okay.
a great speaker because he was divisive.
Okay.
Now, going back to Jasper to address your point, Donald Trump is a great speaker. He has these rallies, and yes, he uses money and dodgy methods to get the people in there, but he does have 33% of a very, very large nation willing to vote for him. He has evangelicals willing to almost dance on their principles and bend the rules for him. He has the Republican Senate doing his bidding. Now, you don't do that just because you're a bully and the bigot and all the next things which are true about him. I'm not saying he's a nice person. Hitler was a great orator. He really was. And what Trump, and I mentioned him specifically because of the technique he uses, which you might not use because of your ethos, but he's willing to do it. So what he does is he panders to the lowest common denominator. In other words, he knows his point. His point is, and this will need to be edited from the tape, white racists, you've got something to rally around. And he doesn't stray from that. And he says, the journey is, I'm going to take you back to when we used to lynch black people. I'm sorry for making this a bit too, but I'm trying to illustrate my point. So he's consistent. He follows all the rules. He's reciprocal. If you like me, he says it. I like Putin. Why? Because Putin likes me. I like the guy in Korea. Why? Because he sent me a letter and was nice to me. That's reciprocity. Just because like me equals like me. And then he says the flip side of that, which I didn't say, which is equally true. If you're not like me, I will hate you. So people don't mess with Trump in the Republican Party because he tweets about them, he removes their funding, and he's got no compunction, and he's consistent with that. And that's why he's got, so you have to understand the outcome of a great speech is not necessarily good, but it is accurate and effective and persuasive. And he does that regularly. So I don't like him. I don't think he's a great person, but he uses the rules of rhetoric, which, and I'll close with this before I hand over to Julian. The things I've showed you there can be equally used for evil as for good. But as Martin Luther King said, for evil to triumph, he didn't quite say this, but I think he would have said it if it meant me. For evil to triumph, it is enough that good people don't learn to speak well. What he said was, for evil to triumph is enough for good men to do nothing. But I think I've changed that a little bit. If good people don't learn to speak well, to get their point across, that's like doing nothing, isn't it? If you can't articulate and argue your point with conviction, courage, communication, charm, charisma, and confidence, you're missing a trick.
I think so.
Perfect. Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I thank you. And I think I have to make an early exit.
Yeah, with Beverly, if you're going, it's time to leave. The party's over.
Well, I want to thank you. And I want to thank you, Brother Julian. Thank you so much for the invite. And it was nice to be here. I have another Zoom meeting on my chapter. So I want to say, I wish you all well. Be safe.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye.
Bye.
Yeah. No, the main reason I asked Don to give his presentation was to really benefit everybody who joined the call. Those who didn't join have missed out. And as Chris alluded to, what Don has presented to us can be used across the board. You don't have to use it in your respective lodges and chapters. You can use it in your everyday life. You can use it at work. You can use it at church. You can use it at a christening, a wedding, anything that puts you in a position where you've got to articulate yourself and not feel uncomfortable doing it because you're as the saying goes, you're properly prepared. And I hope we can get Don back on another occasion, because he's got a lot of experience and a lot of presentations, which will benefit all of us. So Don, thank you very much for taking your time to do your presentation. A lot of the stuff that you mentioned there, not a lot, most of it I've been through with you, as you know, and that just reaffirmed what you told me before. And like you say, the more you repeat it, the easier it becomes. And just that little focus on the little bit that you did tell me, I remember. So I hope we can get some material from you, and you don't charge me too much. I did promise to pay your traveling expenses. So put that in. Make sure you get that paid. So, thank you very much.
You don't know how big his house is.
Yeah, kitchen.
Yeah.
All right.
Carry on.
Thank you so much, Julian. Thank you, everyone. And I wish you the best of the remainder of a wonderful evening. Lovely to meet you all. I look forward to speaking with you again.
Look forward to it.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Okay,
Bye,
good.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Right, that's the end of this call, because I need a drink.